As noted in IFAC's 2010 submission, and I was part of these submissions when I was at IFAC, to G20, arrangements that might be considered as part of this work include high quality and timely accrual-based financial reporting. It is so unfortunate that most governments do not even have double entry system, and we have cash-based accounting and single entry system. So our recommendation is, if you want transparency and good governance, please prepare accrual-based financial reporting. I think this should come from the very vocally from the profession and from ICAP for Pakistan. Audited financial statements released within 6 months of the year end. So countries should prepare their balance sheets and issue their audited financial statements. Budgeting, appropriations, and reporting on the same accrual basis. At the moment, it is all cash basis. And because it is on cash basis, this figure fudging takes place. I'll spend some time, if we have time, I will also discuss with you one of the biggest issues that we have today in our economy, which is bankrupting this economy. The circular debt is partly an accounting issue. If we had accrual-based accounting system, this issue would not have been there. And I'll discuss that shortly when I discuss the power sector losses. Full transparency in fiscal positions ahead of general elections, ensuring that voters are fully informed. Limitations on deficit spending, or at least full transparency around the reasons for deficit spending, and explanations of how, over an economic cycle, fiscal balance will be restored. So these are just one of the recommendations. There are a number of recommendations. I'll encourage you to please go on the IFAC website and see these recommendations. They're very relevant to the public sector crisis that is not just confined to Europe, it is a global problem. This goes without saying that we need good corporate governance, not just in private sector, but also in public sector. There are inherent limitations in public sector. The biggest one is that because there is no private ownership, lack of private ownership reduces incentives for performance. And I call them, because I have been associated with so many organizations, I think at least 40% of the public sector organizations I have been associated either as an auditor or an advisor in some capacity or the other. The biggest issue is that I find them to be ownerless organizations. Because there is no private ownership, so obviously people at the helm do not have the pain when they use the assets, when they incur the liabilities, that is one of the biggest issues. We also have this issue, politicians not trained in governance are mostly focused on short-term rather than long-term sustainability. There's either lack or excessive accountability. I've seen both. Either there is no accountability at all, or there is excessive accountability, several audits, apart from the external audit, internal audit, the audit from the Auditor General of Pakistan, the CEOs reporting to the parliamentary committees, to the Senate committees and standing committees and this and that. They're all the time facing that. So that is also a big problem. My friend Khalid is smiling here, I think, from personal experience. So this is also a big issue. Excessive accountability is also an issue, while there is no accountability sometimes. Almost no basis for performance measurement. While there are, as I said, inherent limitations in the public sector, there are inherent limitations in private sector also. There is excessive greed, and in Pakistan, rampant tax evasion. Public sector at least pays the taxes. The private sector, very few people pay taxes. The SOE crisis in Pakistan, very recently there was an Asian Development Bank report, 2012 annual report, highlighted that one of the biggest issues that is impeding the Pakistan's economic growth is the public sector losses. And annual losses are estimated at 300 to 400 billion rupees. due to inappropriate governance, corruption, inefficiencies, and also inappropriate policy. It's not just corruption and mismanagement, but also a policy issue. I think the biggest issue is the power sector actually. If you take out this, and very interestingly, even today, very large number of public sector organizations are also profitable. We only focus on the loss-making entities. There are actually 5 or 6 loss-making entities. Most entities, maybe that's because of their monopolies, and they are in such situation, but they are profit-making. Contrary to general impression, several profit-making PSCs, such as the 2 ports, because they are monopolies, of course, OGDC, PPL, PSO, SSGC, SNGPL, insurance sector, these are very, very profitable organizations. It's not that all the public sector entities are losses. However, it is also a fact that even these may be incurring very large amount of losses hidden in the large inherent profitability due to the monopolistic situations of these entities. One major positive aspect, as I said, is their contribution to the taxes. These are the key governance issues in the public sector. The biggest issue is obviously the inadequate or poor quality of boards. And these are the issues that we have tried to focus on in drafting and developing the code, the governance regulations. Lack of ownership and accountability, decision making extremely slow, lack of initiative, absence of reward and punishment system, inappropriate accountability mechanisms I have already talked about, lack of empowerment of the boards, CEOs invariably appointed by the government and not by the board. One of the biggest issue. See, it's the board's responsibility under the law, under the company's ordinance, to appoint the CEO, but invariably it is Islamabad, the Prime Minister or the Minister who appoints the CEO. Several decisions require approval of Islamabad. Every time major decision, you have to go to Islamabad, to the ministry, to the ECC, or to someone in Islamabad. Lack of transparency. Most SOEs, privates other than listed companies, do not even publish their annual accounts. They do not publish annual report. Public sector entities are public interest companies, you know, they are taxpayers' money. It is only natural that they should prepare their financial statements on a periodic basis and put it on their website, not more, and be accountable to the public. Corruption, nepotism, undue political influence, inadequate levels of remuneration. The board remuneration and the executive remuneration is usually lower than the market, because that is where I think the bureaucracy thinks that the saving is. Real saving is if you invest in people, they become more efficient and use the resources more efficiently. So it is, I think, a big issue that we do not pay, even some of the good people who are there, they're not paid properly. Flawed structure, secretaries, ministers, public representatives on the board. I can give you an example, public example of PIA. The defense minister is the chairman. Now under the PIAC Act, chairman is also the chief executive. Now under the law, the minister is the government actually. Under the rules of business, the decisions made by the minister are deemed to be the decisions made by the government. So minister appoints the board, then he is also the chairman, and as chairman and chief executive of the board, he is also responsible to the board, and board is responsible to him. So there is an inherent conflict. So obviously the system will not work, you know. In another example of a very large organization, and there again this is common, the chairman and CEO are combined.